Space wants you.
We're going back to the moon and then to Mars.
Want to go to space? Let's go.
Just getting to space is the easiest part.
Draw it, write it, build it, dream it, innovate it, invent
Because
it.
once you get to space, you actually have to live in it. Space wants you dead.
Let's expand our thinking.
It's time to think outside of the box.
Let's go.
I see stars.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cities in Space podcast. We're here to help you discover your future in space. I'm your host, Holly Malier. Today, we have a special edition podcast for our final episode of Season 2. I'm so thrilled to have astronauts Sarah Gillis and Menon back with us today. Back in May, I had the opportunity to interview them as they were preparing for their Polaris Dawn mission, along with crew members Scott Poteet and Jared Isaacman. This wonderful mission was full of several firsts, as well as some very lofty goals, which we will be discussing today. If you haven't heard the May podcast, audience, I highly recommend that you listen to it. It will blow your mind. Sarah, Anna, thank you for being back with us on the show. I'm so excited to have you with us again, and I can't wait to talk about this amazing mission. Welcome. How are you both doing?
Thanks so much for having us. It's great to be back. We're really just enjoying sharing the story and can't wait to talk to you today all about it.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you and your audience. So thank you for having us, and really thrilled to be back on Earth and going through really a lot of post-mission things. So really happy to be here today.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. We're doing this again next week, right? I'm just kidding. Okay, but before we even move forward, where are you? Audience, I know that you can't see the screen, but right now I am looking at our amazing astronauts, and you look like you're like sitting in the Dragon. Where are you right now?
We're actually at Vandenberg Air Force Base right now. We're about to visit with a bunch of the SpaceX team here. We've been going around all of the SpaceX sites and getting to talk with the employees of the companies. So we're actually at a launch site in California.
Oh, that's pretty darn cool. Okay, so let's dive right in. You both discussed last May preparation and the goals you had for this mission, including spacesuit testing, medical experiments, a commercial spacewalk, and reaching a targeted apogee of around 1,400 kilometers above the Earth. Can you talk to us a little bit about these goals that you set in place for this launch, whether you felt you met them, and if you felt prepared physically and otherwise? And then I have a load more of questions for you.
Certainly, we had several objectives. Actually, there's one more, which was Starlink communications testing on the mission. So
Yes.
It was really an action-packed mission. We started off with that high apogee, 1,400 kilometers. We actually hit about 1,408 kilometers apogee.
All right.
And then we moved into the first commercial spacewalk ever. And then we performed a number of Starlink tests to really demonstrate the laser communication capabilities. And then interweaved throughout these three major objectives was a ton of science and research. We ended up doing about 40 science and research experiments as a part of this mission.
Wow.
And ultimately, we were able to accomplish all of these objectives, which I think was just really important to us, was really meaningful. There was a lot that we wanted to learn collectively for human spaceflight's future as a part of this. And so it was, a huge SpaceX team, including us on board. We're all really working hard to make that happen. And we were thrilled to come back having done it all.
Wow. I mean, goals well set and well met. I am going to want to talk about that Starlink communication testing in regards to a couple particular things. But I want to talk about the spacesuit testing first. So once in space and opening up the Dragon and relying on SpaceX spacesuits, that was quite a feat. I think every single viewer and follower was holding their breath maybe just a little bit. I know I was. You said in our May interview that the spacesuits are basically mini spaceships. Um, I would have been feeling so much tension at that moment. So tell us a little bit about it. How did it work? Did it work the way you expected? Did it work better than you expected? Were there differences in how you experienced the suit outside versus inside and doing your spacewalk? I want to hear all about all of this.
I think the description we gave of the spacesuit being kind of a little spaceship is so true. On this spacewalk, basically we had to entirely vent our spacecraft once we were pressurized in those suits before opening the hatch and going outside. What's interesting is actually on day 2 of the mission, we got into the suits and performed what we called a mobility demonstration, where we wanted to make sure in the microgravity environment what it was going to be like to move in those suits. We've done a lot of ground training to make sure we're comfortable and confident about the operation, but the one piece you can't really simulate is true microgravity. So kind of the day before, we were all in the spacecraft with different roles through this test. But it was really interesting to make sure we got what we needed to right in training to make sure we'd be safe before we actually went through the spacewalk. And that was really cool just to experience a pressurized spacesuit moving for the first time inside the Dragon spacecraft. I think there was a couple new physics learnings that we discovered as part of that. The suit moved in certain ways, the umbilical moved the suit in certain ways, but overall, pretty much exactly as we expected. And then on the actual day of EVA, we all got suited up. We pressurized on 100% oxygen for about 20 minutes before we started depressurizing the spacecraft. And I would say for all of us, it was this like really 3D sensory experience where you're going through these pressure changes as pressure's dropping. Actually, one of the first lessons you learn is not to hold your breath as you're going through those pressure changes.
Okay.
But there's also temperature changes. As the air is actually leaving the spacecraft, you get like this cooling all across your body inside the spacesuit. And so it was just this really 3D sensory environment inside the spacecraft as all the air is leaving. And then, once we were at vacuum, we were able to open the hatch. Jared actually had to do a manual hatch opening to assist the motor there. But everything went exactly as we had hoped. It really was just like training, which was pretty incredible. A much better view outside, obviously, but we were really prepared with all of our emergency procedures. Each of us has a role, is really paying attention to certain things while we're going through that operation. And I think we're just so grateful to the whole team that made it possible.
Yeah, because it's not just your team in the spaceship. It's the
Correct.
team on the ground too. I mean, this is a massive
Mhm.
undertaking, and how sublime. I mean, feeling that coolness coming in when you open up the capsule in your suit, I would think in a way, yeah, it would just be very surreal and otherworldly. What an experience. You'll probably remember the sensation on your body and your movement for forever. And not to mention, those suits are so cool looking, and they're not quite as cumbersome as you think of in the older spacesuits, So that alone is artistry in a lot of ways. So, well, I'm glad it worked and it worked as expected, and you're all safely back here. It was so courageous. So, you talked about the experiments, over 40 experiments, right? And so I want to think about medicine for a minute. We recently interviewed Shauna Panja. I think y'all know her.
Mhm.
And we talked about space medicine as well on your mission. You plan to do all these experiments, and some were going to be benefiting St. Jude's Hospital. How did those experiments go, and what did you learn? Did you have surprises with those experiments?
So the data from the experiments is still in the process of being analyzed, and it'll probably take months to a year or so before we'll truly get the results from that, as well as great publications and things like that. Um, there was a lot there were a lot of different types of research that we did as a part of this, but we were striving to tackle problems that humans face in human space flight. And so, for example, some of these are space motion sickness. Space motion sickness is something that afflicts about 60% of people that fly into space. And so if you imagine a spaceship that has 100 people in it and 60 of them are throwing up for the first few days on orbit, that's a real problem. And so a number of the pieces of research we did were trying to figure out, what are the mechanisms causing this? Like what people get it and what people don't, and try to better mitigate it because there aren't really there's not a great understanding of which people it will affect. Other pieces of research that we did were pieces of research studying the eye changes and eye problems that astronauts experience upon extended duration microgravity. Um, and so this is a problem that if you imagine a world where you've traveled 9 months to Mars, and by the time you get there you no longer have good eyesight to see the procedures you need to do and make sure to be functional and do the work you're called upon to do, that's another real problem. And so a lot of the work we did was trying to understand the mechanisms behind that so that again we can find mitigations for that for the future of human space flight. So I think that the research went well and went smoothly in flight, but we're still awaiting the results and we'll be fascinated to get them.
Yeah. And of course, that makes sense. It's going to take just a little bit of time to see that. I remember in May having so many visuals discussing some of these topics. And ever since that May podcast, I've been thinking about this horrible memory in the 70s when go to roadside carnivals, as all children did, I'm sure, not just me. And I did that carnival ride where, you stick to the walls, they spin it, you stick to the walls and the floor drops out. And one person got sick in that and they didn't stop it. And then another person got sick and another, and then I got sick. And when we talk about this, I'm like, ooh, I'm really glad y'all are working on that. That's a good thing to be working on. Oh my God. Well, I know St. Jude's, as well as everyone, will benefit. This is part of our human story, the work that you are doing. And they'll appreciate these experiments because not only does it help our future in space, but this is the kind of stuff that helps us right here on Earth right now. Every human being in the human story. So it's so valuable. And while we're talking about St. Jude's, Anna, you co-authored and read the sweetest children's book called Kisses from Space. You read it to your family as well as to a group of patients from St. Jude's Hospital as part of a fundraiser. It was heartwarming, and I loved seeing your sweet kids. And they were just like, yeah, just another day at the office with mom in space. Yeah, we're cool. But I know that memory will be held in your family's story forever. But what a special experience you gave them. How was it? Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. It was really special. It was my first connection point with my family upon getting to space. And so it was the first time I heard their voices from the spacecraft. And that was incredibly meaningful. And knowing, how much heart was behind that story and getting to share that with them, as well as, the brave patients of St. Jude, that was just overall an incredibly meaningful experience for me. But then I think beyond that, I think I'm just really thrilled that it can contribute to St. Jude's noble mission. They have a really important cause and they're doing really, really challenging and important work to try to make a future where no child dies in the dawn of life. And so just really happy that this book could contribute in any way.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed. I do. And with that said, Sarah, you gave me goosebumps watching and listening to you play Rey's theme from Star Wars on your violin with other musicians here on Earth. Holy moly, it was a complete joy. I loved it, and it made me a little weepy. I mean, all these things made me a little weepy. Ladies, you are STEAM in a nutshell. You're all the science, engineering, technology, math, and the arts. This is what we love. So beautiful. How was it for you?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, it was one of the highlights of the mission for me for sure, getting to not only see a wooden violin floating in this 21st century spacecraft. It was so surreal when we first opened it up, just to see that beautiful wood instrument, and then getting to play some incredible music by one of my favorite composers was absolutely surreal. Getting to bring John Williams music that has inspired so many people to love space and be interested in space with us on this journey, was truly incredible. So it was also, ultimately to benefit St. Jude and show that we can do so much more together than we can individually. If you're able to, bring connectivity, if you were really leveraging that Starlink technology to show that you can do so much around the world for good. So it was really, really special for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, personally, I love his music as well. But I know this was so much about Starlink, right? And communication. And wow, did you show it? I feel like y'all were probably very thrilled with how well the Starlink communications worked, I assume.
They were incredible. They surpassed expectations. And we believe so strongly in Starlink, but as this was a test mission, everyone was saying, like, just, if we can get any connection, we'll be happy. We got almost constant connection. It was
Wow.
mind-blowingly amazing. And it allowed us to be able to connect with mission control and function, do work, but it also allowed us connections with our families. We were able to hold several connection, like nighttime calls over like a video messaging service, to be able to say goodnight to our families and see both ways. And I think that was really powerful too.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Was there this might sound a little ignorant. Was there much of a delay? What is the delay for that? Or was it pretty immediate?
It felt immediate. It felt just like you were making a call on Earth.
Yeah, we had really seamless video call with our families. It was pretty cool to look over, and you had all four crew members at different spots in the spacecraft with their headphones and able to talk with their families in the evening right before we went to bed.
Oh my gosh.
And all of us four people having video conversation with almost no impact was really, really special.
That is really special. That's amazing. The future is here, friends. The future is
Sure
here.
is.
Dang. Okay, so while we're talking about kids, I have received 2 emails from 8th graders at the Girls' School of Austin.
Oh.
I want to share them with you. The first email is from 8th grader student Bailey. She says, I listened to the May podcast and it was so cool. I loved being able to hear about the journey of future astronauts and hear them talk about their trip to space. I couldn't decide on just a couple questions, so I'm sending you more. And more she did. Thank you, Bailey. They were all incredible questions, and it was really hard choosing from these. But I've chosen a couple, and if we have time, we'll try to do 3. But we have another student after this. So, first question. What was one of the hardest things about this mission?
I think one thing that stands out is really just the fact that it was action packed with objectives and we had only 5 days.
Yeah.
I think, any one of us, had you asked us on the 5th day if we would take a little bit more time on orbit, we would have said yes. We set out with some really ambitious objectives, and we were really thankful to accomplish them hand in hand with the SpaceX team, but ultimately it made for incredibly busy days. And so absolutely would have loved time for more data gathering and more learning while up there.
That makes sense. So, wait, are you saying that you'd be willing to go back?
Certainly wouldn't put it down, but also love this future where, access to space is opening up. So I'd really love to see more people get to experience the beauty of our Earth from that vantage point.
So say we all. Yeah. Okay. Question number 2. You'll like this one. How was the coffee and the peanut M&Ms?
We had so much fun with them. I think the peanut M&Ms are just so fun to play with. You can shoot them across the spacecraft and kind of play games with people trying to catch them in certain ways, do bounce shots off the walls, and then try and catch the ricochet. So we had way too much fun with them. And it was space coffee is something that we had talked about for a very long time on the ground. And so getting to share that first sip of coffee in space was very, very special.
Yeah. That was kind of amazing when we talked about that in May. I was like, nice. Very nice. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Great questions, Bailey. Maybe we will get to more of those later. We will see with our time. Our second 8th grade student from the Girls School of Austin also wrote in asking some questions. Lila. Thank you, Lila. She wrote, what does your body feel like when you re-enter Earth's gravity?
Re-entry is one of my favorite pieces of the mission. It
Really?
is such a fascinating and dynamic experience. So the whole process takes about an hour, at least on the Dragon spacecraft. And there are certainly a number of remarkable things about it, including the sounds and the visuals. So you have a number of big sounds throughout, including like when your trunk goes away and when your chutes pop out. And then there's a lot of like visuals that are amazing as you're going, as this plasma is building up around your spacecraft. You're seeing these bright neon lights come through your windows, bright pinks and oranges, and kind of flames flicker by the windows, which are it's just this remarkable expected light show. But that, in terms of the feelings, what's really cool about reentry is that you're experiencing a lot of G forces. And so we got to about 4.5 Gs in all through the chest. So that's called GX. But which is actually not that high in terms of like what your body can truly tolerate in that direction. But it actually still felt like a lot. One, because of the extended duration, you feel it for maybe 7-ish minutes long straight. And on top of that, you've been kind of adapted to the microgravity experience for a while. And so even when we hit 0.1 G, we started to feel it, and it was really noticeable. And so then as you sit with it for longer and longer, it kind of reminds me of the image of if an elephant was sitting on my chest. You're like, your cheeks are being pulled back and you kind of feel your windpipe being kind of compressed a bit. And so you have to focus on breathing. But honestly, I loved the experience. It just felt so kind of all full body. And it was a really, really memorable experience.
Wow. So is there a moment where you feel a panic, or is adrenaline and the excitement just overriding that? I mean, I think I would have been scared, but
Well, definitely no panic, but I think a huge part of that is training.
yeah.
The SpaceX team trained us fantastically for this experience. And so we did something called centrifuge training on Earth, and that puts the human in a human-sized centrifuge, and through the spinning force basically creates that same G sensation on your body. So you learn the entire profile before you ever experience it in space. And then on top of that, you know that it exists ahead of time. So it's not a shock to your system, surprising, or panic inducing in any way, thanks to some great training.
Right. Being prepared. Right.
Mhm.
Well, and that's her second question. She said, what were the hardest obstacles to overcome physically on this trip? And it sounds like you got so much training with this. What other obstacles? I mean, I'm assuming there's so many obstacles you were overcoming, but talk to us a little bit more about that, if you would.
I think some of the like physical maybe obstacles we encountered are what every crew member experiences in some capacity, and that's the human body adapting to microgravity. And it really starts as soon as you get to the second engine cutoff. You're on Falcon 9 rocket and you've had, the G loading of launch. You get to orbit, the engine shuts off, and you're thrown forward into your straps, and you're kind of hanging there. But then you also feel like the lack of pressure on your face, and suddenly there's also additional fluid in your face because all the blood that's been in your legs is no longer held there. So you start having a redistribution of fluid in your body. And that's just like the very first thing that happens on orbit. But then, you know, there's all sorts of things symptom wise that you can experience. You can have motion sickness that is nausea or even vomiting. You can have back pain because your spine is elongating. You can have vision changes because of, you know, that fluid shift into your head, stuff like that. So there's this whole series of physical changes that happens in the first really up to 2.5 days. We saw a lot of those symptoms across all 4 of the crew. And so not only are you trying to execute to a really full schedule, you're also dealing with physical challenges. But on top of that, we're also doing this pre-breathe profile for our EVA, which involved slowly lowering the cabin pressure and raising our oxygen concentration. But what that equates to is almost climbing a mountain where you're climbing in altitude over the course of the first 45 hours. So you could also have symptoms related to mountain climbing, like headaches and fatigue. So it was just a really extraordinary physical adaptation challenge at kind of the first half of the mission.
Wow. Yeah. And we've actually naturally answered Bailey's third question I was going to ask, which was, do you think training prepared you well for this? And it sounds like exceptionally well.
Exceptionally well.
Bailey, Lila, excellent questions. And thank you so much for sending those in. Go Girl School of Boston. Okay, really quick game. Both of you have done so much behind the scenes with work for engineering, helping astronauts, management, being astronauts. I want to hear just one word from each of you that describes your experience on this mission. Only one word. I do this with students all the time. They kind of sometimes hate me for it. Finding one word is tricky sometimes, right?
I think for me, it's grateful.
Good one. Well, now, Sarah, you got to feel the pressure.
I think for me, it is probably awe. Every aspect was fairly awe-inspiring.
Excellent words. Okay. I love both of those. Gratitude and awe. And so speaking of that awe, as well as gratitude, when you were looking back at our wonderful home base Earth, did you have that altering, shifting change that so many astronauts have described? Did you feel the extra preciousness of our home planet? Have any epiphanies looking at the Earth light?
I think for me, where I particularly noticed this was as we were coming back home. So that reentry phase, I kind of noticed this warmth come over me, and I think to me it related to the kind of that joy of approaching this beautiful, hospitable Earth that's full of oceans and trees and mountains that I could see out the window as we were getting closer. And then layered on top of that, the knowledge that it held everyone, all of humanity, the people we know, the people we don't know. And these people are capable of such incredible things, building the cities that we could see from space, building the spacecraft that was keeping us safe in space. And I think that compilation of just total joy at being able to come back to that was really powerful to me.
Yeah, I could see that. Wonderfully said. What about you, Sarah?
I think it is unimaginably beautiful up there, and the Earth is this extraordinarily precious gift we have. I think where it really struck me was seeing Earth's atmosphere around Earth, when at times you almost get, I don't know if it's moonlight that's slightly behind the planet, but at times you can see our Earth and you can see this really small atmosphere that's a very small percentage of, the actual radius of the Earth. And it is extraordinary that it is what keeps all of us alive, and that we have this bubble that is able to sustain human life with perfect conditions to keep us all alive. I think certainly it's made me reflect a lot on how we exist as stewards to our Earth, and how we have an obligation to that extraordinary planet.
Well said, ladies. Well said. Well, thank you again, both of you, for being here today. This truly was a special edition podcast with your successful touchdown. We so appreciate you being here today, and have a great journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. It was a joy to talk with you.
It was a joy to talk with you too. I am in awe. Audience, if you like what you heard and learned about today, please consider following us on our Cities in Space Facebook page, as well as our Insta at Steaming for Space, and sharing this podcast with your friends, colleagues, the world. We'd also love to hear from you. We want to know how you are using these podcasts in your classroom. Just go to our website at steam-space.org and hit the Contact Us button. We are grateful for our supporters, and if you would like to join others with a donation as we seek to reach students everywhere, just visit our site and hit Support Us. Every donation matters and helps us to produce new content and create aligned essential questions and classroom projects, which you can find on our website along with our podcast for free. You can also subscribe to us on Spotify, Google, Apple, Podcast Addict, Amazon, and most major platforms. Special thanks to our studio producers at RNCN Studios, podcast musician Nate Zivin, and the amazing team at STEAMSPACE. It takes a village, and what a village we have. That's a wrap, audience. See you in Season 3. Until next time, I'm Holly Malier. Keep looking up.